Hello, I'm Kate. I'm 22 years old, and my life was completely turned upside down when I was told I had only 3 months to live. You'd be surprised if I said Neymar changed my life, right? Let me start from the beginning. Before I dive into my story, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I can still hear the doctors saying, "Unfortunately, you have at most 3 months left." It felt like all my future plans, dreams, and hopes turned to ashes in an instant. I had a very rare disease, resistant to medication and spreading quickly. The doctors just shrugged, saying, "There are experimental treatments, but no guaranteed outcome." Right at that moment, I heard a rumor. There's a clinic in Paris that treats this disease. Paris became my last hope, but there was a huge problem. I had no money, no family, no one. Still, I spent the last of what I had on a one-way plane ticket. Either I risk everything, or I've already lost, I told myself as I boarded the plane. When I landed in Paris, my eyes sparkled with hope. Even though I had no other options, I kept telling myself, I can get better here. But I couldn't speak French and barely knew any English. At the first hospital I went to, they said, "We can't take patients without an appointment." At the second clinic where I sought refuge, they said, "The treatment is experimental. Insurance won't cover the cost." And so the doors kept slamming in my face. I was desperate and my money was dwindling day by day. On top of that, my illness was progressing rapidly, my body sending out alarm signals. The pain grew worse and sometimes my vision blurred. But I was stubborn. I kept telling myself, don't give up. One morning, the owner of the hostel said, "Your payment is done. You must leave the room." I had to go out onto the street. It was a windy midday, and once again, I was wandering around hospital entrances. I was hungry, my gaze was unfocused, and my body was exhausted. Suddenly, I collided with someone. The impact was so strong that I fell to the ground. The person wore a hooded jacket and a cap that concealed his face. He leaned over me in a rush. "Are you okay?" Shivering, I managed to say, "I think so." He spoke English, and although his voice wasn't familiar, somehow I felt safe with him. As he helped me up, I still couldn't fully see his face. "Do you want to go somewhere?" he asked. Honestly, I was afraid. How could I trust a stranger? But I was at the end of my life and had nothing to lose. So I started walking beside him. He took me to a taxi waiting on the corner of the street. I didn't ask where we were going. Maybe my gut told me that he wasn't dangerous. The taxi stopped in front of a fancy hotel. I remember the puzzled looks from the receptionist as we walked in. The hooded man quietly directed me to the elevator. When we entered the room, he finally took off his hood, placed his glasses and cap aside. Was I ready for the shock? The person standing in front of me was Neymar. Yes, the world-famous football star. I recall whispering, "You're Neymar." He smiled. "That doesn't matter. Are you okay?" At that moment, I had no idea what to say. It was like stepping into a movie scene. He, on the other hand, immediately made some arrangements, called a doctor. The hotel doctor came and examined me, gave me vitamins and painkillers, and provided supplies so I could wash my face and take a hot shower. I felt like I'd entered another world. I kept wondering, is this really possible? But yes, it was happening. That night, I slept deeply in a warm bed. When I woke up in the morning, Neymar was beside my bed. "How do you feel?" he asked. In a tired but grateful voice, I replied, "I'm fine. Thank you so much. But why are you helping me?" His eyes held a thoughtful expression. "When I saw you lying on the ground yesterday, I had a terrible feeling," he said. "Maybe someone else would have done the same, maybe not. But I couldn't just leave you there." I fell silent for a moment. It was the first time in my life that someone had taken such ownership of me. In a few short sentences, I told him my story, my illness, the doctors who gave me 3 months to live, the experimental trial in Paris, and my lack of money. As I listed them, my throat tightened. Neymar thought for a moment, took a deep breath, and said, "Give me your doctor's contact details. If necessary, I'll cover all the expenses. Just do everything you can." Hearing these words, tears fell from my eyes. Anyone in my place would have cried, I believe. I never expected such a huge act of kindness. Neymar's manager, doctor friends, and even people around the club all mobilized. They arranged an appointment at that much-talked-about experimental treatment center in Paris. The big name of the football world opened all the doors. Just the day before, I was being turned away by hospital after hospital. The next day, I was taken to a specialized clinic by private ambulance. I couldn't comprehend how life could change so drastically. My treatment began. It was an experimental drug protocol, different from chemotherapy. The side effects were severe. My body felt like it was breaking, and I was vomiting and running a fever. Sometimes I rebelled, thinking, how can I endure this much pain? Each time Neymar stopped by, he'd cheer me on. "Keep going," he'd say, finding time between his training or matches to visit my bedside. He would tell me funny anecdotes from the football world, jokes from the locker room, trying to make me laugh. A strange but strong bond formed between us. We actually knew very little about each other, yet we felt like family. Every word of encouragement he offered gave more strength to the medication flowing through my veins. The first weeks of treatment were pure hell. It felt like my body was undergoing a heavier trial each day. On one side was the fear of death, on the other, the feeling Neymar promised he won't leave me like this. These thoughts constantly battled in my mind. When the doctors said, "Hang in there, we see improvement in your numbers," I became hopeful. But then there were moments when I was writhing in pain, struggling not to scream, "Enough, make it stop." That's when my source of morale would step in once more. Neymar was covering all treatment costs, managing appointments, everything. He kept telling me, "If you give up, all our efforts go to waste," in a joking tone. I would laugh and then cry. Meanwhile, the media began running stories like, "Neymar spotted at the hospital with a mysterious woman." Some believed I was his new girlfriend, others said I was a sick fan. At the request of his manager, we stayed silent. My goal wasn't fame, it was survival. As the treatment entered its advanced stages and the doctors said, "We're seeing progress," sparks of hope flickered inside me. Over time, my test results started to improve. Was I completely cured? It was too early to say, but the person who was given 3 months to live was still standing 6 weeks later. When Neymar heard this, he burst into my room exclaiming, "That's it! You're on the road to victory!" and gave me a hug. It was possibly the happiest moment of my life, not just physically, but emotionally as well. I felt like I had been brought back to life. "I'm really breathing again at last," I thought to myself. Finally, the doctors announced that I had completed the critical stages of my treatment successfully. They said it was too soon to declare that my illness was gone, but at least I distanced myself from death's cold breath for the time being. When I left the hospital, I wondered, where do I go now? I still didn't have a single penny. Neymar must have sensed this because he said, "I have an apartment in the city that's empty. Stay there until you recover." A storm of gratitude swirled within me. So much kindness, so much selflessness. I felt I owed him a debt. But he ignored my sense of gratitude, saying, "Your getting better is the biggest thank you." During my first week in his apartment, I hesitated to touch his belongings. Lying in his bed, I'd ask myself, when will this dream end? But it didn't. It was real. He was a person who gifted me a new life through his kindness. A while after I was discharged, Neymar and I said our goodbyes because it was a busy period for his team at the end of the season. "Keep up with your checkups," he told me. "If you need anything, get in touch with me." We hugged tightly. I felt a sweet ache in my heart, like I was saying goodbye to a member of my own family. As I write these lines for you now, I'm continuing my treatment and getting better every day. People used to say, Paris is the city of romance. For me, Paris is the city where, while waiting for death, I grasped life again, where a football star took my hand at my most desperate moment, and where I set sail for an entirely new future. No matter how big the obstacle you face, a small act of kindness can help you overcome it. And sometimes, the owner of that kindness comes from the other side of the world, appearing in the most unexpected form.